So welcome to the Neufeld Institute's weekly panel on parenting in a pandemic. The Neufeld Institute is about applying developmental science to raising children, parenting, and teaching them. But how are we to do this in the middle of a pandemic when everything seems to have changed? I'm Gordon Neufeld, and joining me to help answer your questions are two of our Neufeld Institute faculty. Dr. Deborah McNamara is author of Rest, Play, Grow, Making Sense of Preschoolers, as well as the children's book, The Sorry Plane. And she is joining us from her home in Vancouver. I'm also at my home in Vancouver. Tamara Strijack is our academic dean in the Neufeld Institute and co-author of Reclaiming Our Students about emotional health in schools. And she is joining us from her home in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island, and obviously is the one who knows most about how this works. And so we're very dependent upon her on this and thankful for her for making this happen as well. So we'll begin, and Tamara will bring in the questions, both that have been forwarded before, as well as coming in through the live as well. And let's begin.
All right. Well, we're going to start with a couple questions just around the theme of boredom. That's a word that is coming up a lot. And kind of the difference between boredom. What is the balance between this idea of actually needing to learn to be with oneself and needing to reach out and connect? The difference between being, when is the solitude important, and what about even just the word boredom? That's what I thought maybe we could start there with the word boredom and what is needed right now.
I'd love to start with a word. I love I love the word studies, and boredom is certainly has a fascinating word history in the English language, at least. I don't know about other languages, but it comes from the word to bore, which is to bore a hole. And so boredom is about this feeling of there being a hole, there being a vacuum, there being an emptiness. And generally speaking, if we understand what the whole is about, if we can feel the whole, I can say, and I'll just create some context. If we can feel the whole, then we feel it in one of two ways. We feel it as either what we're missing. And so the generic sense would be the young child who says, I miss, and then names the whole. I miss mommy, I miss my friends, I miss, this, I miss daddy doing this. And so you name the whole so you can feel it. So when we're lost our feelings, we tend to say we're bored rather than I miss. And the other whole is that we're missing ourselves, our emergent self, that we can't think of anything to do. It's not coming from ourself. Our emergent self isn't there. That might be just situational, or it might be more characteristic. And so boredom tends to be an indicator. Sometimes if it's general, not if it's situational, but general, as if we've lost, we're not missing acutely enough, or feeling that place of missing, because the resolution to boredom there is sadness, is being able to feel sad about what we miss. And that's the resolution. And the resolution to the other, of course, the answer to the other is to fill it with ourselves, is to fill it with our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own imaginings, our own creativity. So that's basically the word usage. And from that, and I'll guess I'll start the conversation, then pass it on. But from that is that the best kinds of things to, if you're trying to guide a child in there, is not to fill the boredom with entertainment, because that just camouflages it. And so if you do it through video games or entertainment, it doesn't really take care of it. It camouflages for a bit, but a child is just as bored or even more bored after. And the answer is more to answer it if you have a sense that the boredom is about feeling sad about the lack of togetherness, then a togetherness activity would be the best way to go. Do something that has about togetherness, something that has to do about contact. I'm bored. Come here. Let's do something together. Let's cook something together. Let's do something together. If you suspect that it is because they can't quite feel themselves, their own thoughts and ideas and imaginings, the best kind of thing is not entertainment, but something that is either playful or that is like creative, crafty agency, things that they're actually making and doing things. This is very satisfying and really takes care of it because it comes from inside out. Basically speaking, the things that are not good for boredom, but we tend to seek for boredom, are the things that go from outside in. Those aren't good. They just camouflage it and they don't resolve it. Things that go from inside out or are connections with the people who care about you and love you, those are the two things that really, really resolve it. And play, oh my goodness, play engages. So anything that's really playful is really, really the answer to it. In fact, play theorists actually theorize, they believe that boredom used to be what was the trigger for true play, that is, for playful activity. And now that we've learned to fill it with entertainment, with the things that from outside instead of inside, to enter into play. And so the ultimate answer would be, if you can fill it with playful activity, that probably is what boredom was meant to precipitate in us and is the healthiest response. So I went on and on a little bit, but obviously I'm quite excited about boredom and what it is and the words and so on. But Deborah, do you have thoughts you would like
Well,
to?
you're not boring, and you've got a lot to say on boredom, which is good. It is a fascinating area. I would agree with you. That emotion and emptiness, and the importance of being able to feel emptiness, and that if we can't feel
Mm,
emptiness, what's
yes.
happened to our vulnerable feelings? And it's such a marker of health that you can
Mm,
actually feel your empty feelings. So
yeah.
it is actually a very interesting marker when you look at vulnerable feelings. I often think, as you were talking, what I was thinking of, were my kids being online. And if you've been on the internet and seen some pictures of kids trying to sit in front of screens and doing their schoolwork with their shirts over their heads or falling asleep or just
Mm,
and when I think about this word boredom, when I hear it from my kids, particularly these days, it's usually following work. They've been made to work, they've got to do schoolwork. There's a sense that they're trying to meet this external needs that you're talking about, Gordon. Everything's, coming from the outside into the child. And then it turns off and they're done. And you can see that they're drained. You can see there's this level of tiredness or exhaustion, just mental exhaustion. And then I hear, I'm bored. And I see it as the switch between work and into play, and,
mm,
being
mm,
able to fill yourself up, that there is a sense that, okay, all the activity has stopped and something is missing. Now, how do I catch up with my feelings that have been turned off because I've been paying attention to external
yes.
stimuli, that I've got problems to solve, I've got people to answer to, and then there's this dead stop, and it's like, I'm bored. And it's exactly, what you say, is to come back to either provide some togetherness, provide to set the stage for maybe some play or some creative solitude, or just have some time together to get out of that work mode and into relationship or get into play. That those would be the two other places
Mhm.
that we could drive that shift from work, which is about achievement, into either play, which is about self-actualization, or into relationship, which is all about togetherness and fulfillment.
That's a really good point. I hadn't actually thought of it that way, but you're right. In the work mode by the very nature of the work mode on our whole nervous system, the feelings are inhibited so that we can do our work. And so that would mean that we're less able to feel the whole. So that would be it. It's just after we've done this, we're more likely to be bored, and we need a time for our feelings to catch up with us. And that would be exactly what would be a good thing to do, is to have that time, that solitude, that playful, emotional playground for our feelings to catch up with us. And then we should be able to feel ourselves again, because we
Yeah.
can't feel ourselves
Yeah.
and
And
feel what
usually,
we miss. And there's so much that's missing right now. And so that's why so many people have such a significant boredom, but again, the generic word would be I miss. And that is where you could really feel what it is that the whole is about.
yeah, it reminds me when you're saying how my kids will come after schooling and they'll come and seek me out. They'll sit on my lap and then they'll just start talking about how awful school is and how frustrated they are,
Hmm.
and this is what happened and somebody did this and you won't believe this, and it's just kind of all their feelings start to spill out of them as if to catch up, and it's always usually a big rant about what isn't working right now for them.
Yes. Yeah, we do have a lot of rants in us these days.
Oh,
Sometimes we have to start there to get anywhere. It's just like,
many.
oh yeah, the rants need to come out. It's
Yeah.
always good that we can have somebody we can rant with that doesn't take it too seriously. Yeah.
But I wanted to just add in just a little bit. Deborah, I love that piece about the context too, because so much of it is about doing that work. But the thing about the work right now that I think is challenging is the lack of engagement, and just to bring those two pieces together of what you were talking about, the engaging piece, um, and 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 when there's no engagement in it, when it's not something that is actually bringing out anything, like you say, it's outside in, it's stimulus response, it's not stimulating, so to speak. It's just uh, it's not a teacher that they're engaging with or doing it with. It loses. We can't just expect this to be the same as how it might be in the classroom. And so there's that challenge as well, just on the school front of it. Um, and then the other piece that I was thinking about is this whole desire to escape. I mean, I think of boredom that way too,
Mm,
that we move into, we want to escape
yeah.
our feelings. We don't want our feelings to catch up with us. And so we,
Hmm. Yeah.
we, we look to the
We
escape.
want to run away from those.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on what we're looking for in escape, will actually bring us back to ourselves and surprise us. When we get caught off guard by a story or something on a show that we're watching for escape, it can kind of bring us back to ourselves. But um, I yeah, there's a question here that's related that I'll just bring in, and I think this is a challenge that a lot of people are having is their children spending a lot of time on their mobile devices, watching movies or playing games, and they're running out of ideas. And I hope you took some ideas from what was just mentioned here, even just in terms of
Mm,
something that is more engaging, that's drawing
yes.
from the inside out.
Yeah.
Blank paper, pens, markers.
I
Some
get the
people I know
models
have,
that have never been put together,
yeah,
like
yeah,
crafts, get a few things.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. This is a time to restore
yeah.
crafts. There's so much stuff lying in most households that you can turn into the wonderful creating and making things.
Yeah, one of my friends had done that with her kitchen table. She just covered it in paper and then just left markers on the table. And then it was just for any of her, and she had young and older members of the family, and they just would come and doodle and draw. It was just something to have those little outlets, and just try to stir it. It might be harder for some children to access that place in them, and so just finding those little, planting some little seeds or just making it really easy. That's what I always say, is just make
Yeah.
it easy, make it feel
Set-
doable.
Setting the stage,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Setting the
You,
stage.
you put the props, you set the stage, you
Yeah,
you walk you walk away as if it doesn't matter all that much, and pretty
yeah,
soon, they're there.
yeah.
I, I,
Well,
I have to. I was going to say that in the, this last week, I've sometimes I've heard your voices in my head, not in a bad way or a psychotic way, but in a way that says, I don't feel like playing. I don't feel like doing. I feel that sense of, oh, and I can hear in the back of my head, our conversations about find an emotional playground, and get yourself to that emotional playground. But sometimes you feel that inertia inside of you. And so I think of it kind of like a habit, like just like I brush my teeth. I don't really always want to brush my teeth. Sometimes, I do brush it. It's a habit that I need to have. And so I think getting ourselves to play, especially when we don't feel those natural pulls, and when we are preoccupied, when emotionally we are so drained and we are so exhausted and everything is turned upside down, that we can't forget that play is a good habit.
Mhm.
And that once we get started with it, even if we feel that boredom, just get yourself moving. Doesn't matter. Just somehow get yourself moving. Empty your linen closet, throw all the pillows on the floor, just whatever you need to do. Get moving somehow to kind of fill the space, and make play a healthy habit, because I think it really, we've talked about it every week,
Yeah.
at how it's going to preserve us emotionally. But I think sometimes we just don't feel like playing and we're bored ourselves, and we just need to kind of, okay, here we go. I'm going to try to have fun.
Well, I think most of us have some silliness in us, though. All we have to do, all we have to do is give a little room for silliness, and our kids will not be able to refuse. You can just go with
Oh,
the
so
flow,
Yeah.
just to find it. Like it takes its own life,
Yeah.
and
yeah,
there's got to be that. And every single one of us wants to slip sideways. It just we really do want to,
yeah.
and it's a wonderful escape. Like it's a great escape from reality, because it invites others to slip out of reality for a little bit too, and play.
Hmm.
So yes, there are so many entry points to it. But
Hmm.
children, if you want to engage your children, uh just put on your silly hat, just act a little bit this way, and they'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'll move to the next set of questions here, but I just want to make a comment here. Someone's just mentioning the kids that were actively involved in sports during the week, some of the activities, and it's harder now and there's the boredom that comes from that as well, because now these activities are not available to them. So you have to get creative, and that's the piece. My daughter's, I had a daughter that was doing kickboxing class. Well, she can't do that anymore, but she can. She just took up jogging. She's kicking other things in the air and finding ways to keep that activity of course, depending on what resources you have. But this is our time for creativity.
Yes.
We've got to find other
Yeah.
ways, because this we need this more than ever, and we can't just stand kind of idly by, so to speak.
Yeah.
We've got to jump in and just use our creativity.
Hmm.
um,
And
there
you know,
there's some questions here, and so I'll just shift gears now, and uh, to some questions coming from people who are frontline workers. A few different questions. One is from a mother who's a physician and working at night at the hospital, and she's very concerned about her children who are concerned, understandably. And so, especially her 11-year-old child, who's already worried, has some attention problems, and is already anxious about her mother, their mother leaving. And so she's worried about them sensing her emotions, and she's trying to do some bridging exercise and do this, letting them sleep with a shirt of hers while she's gone, those kinds of things. Um, but the way that she worded this, I just want to read this part out loud. She said, "I wish I could find the tears myself. Maybe that will release my tension and help them. But I feel that if I cry, I will break apart and won't be able to help my kids feel safe or be able to function as a physician." And I just thought that was beautifully said.
yeah.
And I think that is the challenge, is how do we find those places for ourselves, for the release that's needed? Um, and there is that feeling that you might fall apart if you even just touch on it. And I can understand that as well. And so that challenge of holding that space for your children, but also finding that space for yourself so you can be that place for your child.
Hmm.
On the falling apart thing, first of all, yes, absolutely. There's so much in what you said and what you're dealing with. here. Falling apart, one way to make it easier for yourself is again to make a play date with your sadness, the grief, in some music that you love. It's only a 4 minute, 5 minute piece or something like this. Just do it. So it allows you to feel sad for that time. When the music is over, you got to go back to work. And it's just giving it a little bit of time to have its play rather than going into a deep dive. If you're afraid that it may be too much and there's too many tears under there and you won't stop, usually grief doesn't work that way, but maybe there's just not even enough room that you feel in your space. You just have to function and so on. But even a little, just a little, you know, your favorite sad story that you can read, just so there is a beginning and an end. And don't worry about what you feel sad about. Just the sadness itself will help ground you and will help make you just a little bit more creative and a bit softer. And so that's, I'm sure Deborah and Tamara will have other things to say about that as well. The other thing I'd like to say is we often think, what can we say to our kids in times like this? You know, often people will say, everything will be okay. I'm a bit hesitant to say that because that's not always the way it is. It's not always okay. And most people by now will know someone or someone that isn't okay. And so I don't think that's a way to set it up. And actually, this can't be addressed rationally. But the surprising thing is how much it can be addressed relationally. The wonderful thing is that when when um, uh, when when children are around you and you are not acting alarmed yourself, but you can save it for when you're with your friend or a dialogue partner or other adult who can take it. But when around child, they actually feel safe just being around you. And when you can say, "Oh, come here right now, you need a hug," that's a hard feeling to have, and that's a hard concern, and you just bring them here. You don't actually have to answer it cognitively. You can answer it relationally by being with each other, and just always putting the focus on the next connection, the time of togetherness itself. The connection itself does the job of allaying the alarm with children. It's almost as if it's magic that we don't have to figure out what to say, because the world is an alarming place. And there are times in this world that have been a whole lot more alarming than they are now. Again, I don't want to put that into perspective, but the fact is there are places in this world where bombs drop, where things happen, and they still have to live. There are refugee camps and so on. But the fact is, children are protected by the place that if they're around us, and when they're around us, we can give that sense of that just being ourselves and leave our alarm for other times that we can talk to other adults. Our children will feel safe when around us. It would it will feel more bearable, which means that we don't actually have to lie about it, and we don't have to actually give false assurances, and we don't have to actually discuss or put words to the fears that are out there or the alarm that is out there. So that's it's wonderful that that is so, because otherwise it would be quite unbearable. And how do you talk to your children about this? And it's wonderful that the safety for them is a relational issue, not a cognitive issue. It's a relational issue.
Yeah. I love everything you said there, Gordon. I think when I think about being alarmed as a parent, it's a really hard time to lead when you're alarmed yourself as a parent. It seems to take out the, that place that you can show up for your kids where you're inviting them to lean on you and to be the answer. When you are alarmed yourself, it seems to rob you of that confidence sometimes, or the face that you can put onto your children. If there were a trick, I'd hate to even call it a trick, but if there was a place that I focus most of all when I'm alarmed this way, and as a physician, I understand, yes, you're dealing on the front lines here with COVID. There is lots of alarm everywhere you look. And when you look to your children, you see such alarm inside of them. But I do think that is the place that you can land on, in the sense that if you can see that your children are alarmed, I think it will help move the instincts inside of you. I know the fear is that you might crack open and the tears will come out. But I actually think that the more that you see your child is needing you in that place, that they're needing security and safety, and that you're the answer to that, I actually think that you'll find the instincts inside of you to rise to that. As a physician, walking your patients through their treatment and reassuring them, I already know this is inside of you, and I know it's inside of you to deliver to your kids. You know, I always think back to the plane example, you know, and I hate when they say, oh, you know, as a parent, put your oxygen mask on first. But it's very curious on an airplane why they have to remind you, when you're as a parent, that when you have an oxygen mask, that please don't put it on your child, put it on yourself, because it is counterintuitive to your instincts as a parent to take care of yourself first. If you're truly in that place where you see your child and your instincts are to take care of them, you actually move in that direction, and you can feel your emotions slide out of the way, just even temporarily, to take care of your child. And you'll be able to say things from that place of understanding your child, to have the courage to say things and to face things that you wouldn't be able to do without those wonderful alpha instincts that say, my child needs me to say, I'll be back at 7. Yes, here's my pillow. I'll be eating lunch the same as you. So and so will take care of you. Mommy will be right back. Now, you know, when you leave your child or you go and have some time on your own, you know those tears might come. You know that might have been a bit of a front that you had to put on. But I do believe that when you can feel what it is that your kids need, when you can feel those instincts inside of you, I know that you can show up. I know you feel the wall of tears there, but I know you can show up if you dig into insight into your child and into those instincts, because this is what we're made for.
Yeah. There's quite a few questions around finding that alpha place, getting back into that place as a parent when our own alarm is so high. And particular memory comes to mind of one time when my daughter was quite ill and was getting these terrible, terrible stomach cramps. And I was so worried. I had no idea why she was getting these. And I went into her bedside one night. She was about 7 years old. And I had this worried look, as I can. I just look on my face and I just said, oh yeah, I don't know what's going on. I wonder why this is happening. Oh, this is just so hard, so confusing. And I wasn't thinking, but she stopped me in my tracks. She says, Mommy, stop. You're giving me the heebie-jeebies. And I'll never forget that, because I just had to stop to my tracks, and I did an about turn. I was like, of course, we got this. We're going to figure this out. We don't have the answers now, but we're going to find the answers, and you're going to be okay. We're going to figure this out together. And I had to change on a dime, because I was leading to more alarm. And even though, yes, that alarm was still there, I couldn't pretend it wasn't, but I had to pretend it wasn't in that moment. Because she needed me. She needed a different part of me. She needed to know she could count on me.
There's another part to that alpha thing I just mentioned. When you're in the alpha mode, you feel less fear. And that's very, very interesting. You do. And I go back to Pippi Longstocking and the wonderful stories, every scenario where she's on top of things. She's in the alpha mode and she's in control. And one of the things that you can focus on, this is a good place actually for children to feel alpha, because they won't feel so afraid. But I'm talking to the physician now, like you are a super mom. You are saving others, and you are a super family. Your family is involved in saving others. And when this is the true super place, and you can enter this place in both your thinking and bring her along with it. So she has this pride and dignity in this. It's a place that you don't actually feel the alarm of what can happen, because in that you are saved from that in this alpha place. And so, yeah, you're the super mom now. We need you, and you are. And but you can bring this girl into that experience as well. And it's a place, again, that the world is the same, but you don't feel it the same way. And that's the thing. When she's with you, and when you're together in saving this, you don't feel the alarm in that way. And so you might need a dose of this, and she might need a dose of this.
Mm,
This
yeah. Yeah. Well, and I
You
well, thank you.
put
Thank you.
your capes on.
Yeah.
Put your capes on.
Yeah.
You can.
Well, I want to bring in another situation here. So this is also a frontline worker, but this is now a husband and wife who are working from home, and a similar question just came in to into our questions live here as well, um, and and basically it's hard because they're home, but they're facing separation because they can't be with. There's meetings all the times, and they're having to be online, and so there's this illusion of togetherness, but they're not available. And that is really challenging. And when this particular family has young children, 2 and 4-year-old, and so they are trying to figure out, they don't have a set schedule, it changes every day. um, and and so it's challenging. How do you do this? How do you do this when there's chaos around you? 2 and a 4-year-old, they're, just from what you described, I can only imagine. Um, and and that is a challenge. And I think the first thing that came to mind, and I'll just maybe just give a thought and then I'll pass it back to you, is that even though the schedule changes every day, I know for myself and my family, our schedule changes every day as well. And I have a lot of online commitments. I make a new schedule every day. I make it up the night before. I at least try to have some semblance of schedule, even if it changes. And so, yes, we can't have the same routines, but I try to find those little times. When is the time for connection? So they know what they can count on, and that there's little pockets that I can kind of say, okay, this is something that we can build, that you can count on, that we can build our time around. Having something like that are landing points, because they're going to need to get filled up. And when you can be intentional about filling them up, then they can go a little bit longer on their own without needing you all the time. And that's the challenging piece, is when it feels like you're not available at all, they're just going to keep seeking you. There's going to be this pursuit that they're just going to keep trying to find you. I don't know if you want to speak to that one.
Well, I would just like to go along the same line. And when your schedule really is random, when you really don't know, when you can't predict it, you need props. It's very important for there to be signals when you are accessible and when you're not. And these signals need to be very clear for them. When I started working from home, with still young kids in the house, that was the most difficult for them to know when they had access to me and when not access to me. And so you really needed to put the props, whether it was, whatever it is, you get something that's very clear. The teddy bear is on the shelf, or there is this here or that there, or there's some kind of picture that is turned around when you're accessible, and so on. And that's part of it. The part of it is when you are accessible, some kind of initiative, some kind of going and recollecting is important, so that you do, and because you can't afford to be passive. And that's what Tamara was talking about. If you are passive and only going to the squeaky wheel, it means they're responsible. They're going to start pursuing more and more and more. You got to take advantage of the 10 minutes that you do have in between your commitments to actually give more than is pursued, take a lot of initiative, try to bring to the satiation point. If you're passive, they're going to be pursuing you more and more and more. And the third part of it is that our best babysitter is true play, because play is very, very engaging. And so setting that play, when you think of the Holocaust movie Life is Beautiful, and you think of, I don't know how long the shifts were that dad had to work in that, but it's, probably 12-hour shifts that they would be in this kind of situation. And he set the boy into the play mode, that he stayed in the play mode the whole day. He set the stage. Now that was a creativity for it, because he had to, he had to parent while being away for 12 hours with nobody being there. Plus the boy couldn't be found and couldn't afford to talk to anybody. So what was the secret? It was the play mode. Now you got to know your child, you got to know what engages them, but you start setting up the play that truly engages, and when they engage, that becomes your way of being able to take care of them. You've handed them over to nature, because this is really where nature takes care of a child in the play mode. So you've handed them to nature, but that play needs to be structured, and that is key. And it takes some planning. You can't just be reactive. You squeeze a few minutes of your time to actually think about this and actually think how you could make some progress in this. But the signs have to be really, really clear about when you're accessible, when you're not accessible. A lot of initiative in satiating with togetherness when you do have those times, and setting up for true play, whether it's creativity, building kinds of things, Lego, whatever the child is, but the true play that they just can go on and on and on for hours in this, so that. Because this is the healthiest place for them, the place where they are not alarmed, the place where they don't actually even miss you when they're in this place. It's wonderful, because the attachments are to rest, and so you're actually not in pursuit. But it's simple to say it. It's not necessarily easy to flesh this out, and I recognize this. It takes some thinking to do that, but at least the guidelines are there for how this can be done.
Yeah. I think the other thing I would add to what you both said, which is really helpful to deliver to play, is also to think about, you have two adults in the house, and so you have a luxury here of two people. How do you serve as an attachment relay team between the two of you,
Yeah.
where you make it really clear? And I had to do that a lot with my husband when my kids were little, is to be really clear. Okay, you're on lunch duty. No, I'm on lunch duty. Okay, you got a meeting. Okay, I've got a meeting. Okay, who's on deck? Who's
Yeah.
taking the lead? And to be really clear with the kids. Okay, daddy's got time with you. I'm going to do this. I'll come back. I'll see you for lunch. So that you're serving as a tag team, an attachment relay team between the adults that you have that are available to children, and orienting to those adults. And so
Yeah.
you don't actually, a schedule is wonderful, a routine is wonderful, but if you have a good attachment relay team, you can actually have a lot of switchbacks and a lot of flexibility in that, because you've got your children always orienting to adults that they're attached to, even if it's grandma on Skype, whatever it is that you need to do, as long as you can put an adult in the lead and serve as a relay team this way. I think that's what certainly when I talk to parents that are both at home working, this seems to be the best way they can get through their day, is to function as sort of this unit, who's taking the lead at this point, and work together.
That's a very good point. To be efficient in terms of the resources, is you really
Mhm.
do need to have this tag team division of labor to be able to make sure someone is on hand. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to add in too, because I know some, and the next question that I'm going to go to is a single parent, and so they have that particular
Mhm.
challenge of how to do this. But it came to mind, a friend of mine that was telling me about how she was brought in as the aunt for her 4-year-old, virtually. They're in different provinces, of
Ah.
course, and only 4. So he doesn't do the video thing well, but they just had the same toy on either side, and they were just
Mhm.
playing, and it was just more this supervision almost to kind of
Mhm.
guide them a little bit while both parents were working. And
Mm.
I just, how beautiful was that?
Oh,
It's
that's
just kind of
wonderful.
trying to find a way creatively
Mhm.
to do this, not thinking that it was going to be engaging necessarily. They'd have conversations. It was just to be with, just to be with. Know someone was on the other
Yeah.
side. Grandparents that are doing this.
Oh.
Beautiful stories from one of our facilitators, Nancy, about how she had grandma time at 3 o'clock every day, and her grandchildren would come on, and they would just read stories together and hang out together. You know, drawing on those resources now more than ever, even though we have to do it creatively and virtually. But yeah.
Oh, no, the amount of kisses that went onto the screen from our grandchildren when we were doing this, through Skype, just being on. One of the things when we were traveling and our grandchildren were young was also to make sure that we had the same book that they had. So when we read it, they could thumb through it, and you could read it to them, but they could thumb through the pages so that they could see this. But there's so many things that are possible that way, and to bring in our village, like actually bring them in and use the technology in its best possible way to, for the connection that children really need, because this connection is wonderful if we can use this to make use of our village in this way.
Yeah, so I'm going to switch now just to this next question. This is a single parent whose child was already having challenges before the pandemic. So this was someone who's just a little background, 5-year-old, had a wonderful kindergarten teacher, and had struggled with emotional intensity, struggled with impulse control, and very musical. I just want to highlight that piece because that piece seemed particularly important. He had some other struggles, was blind in one eye. There's some things there. Was working with an occupational therapist, and they had, just before the pandemic, they had been suggested to take weekly play therapy sessions, and they were going to be doing this for some time. So the question came, the parent feels like they have to start all over again now without these support systems in place, wondering, should she do virtual play therapy? Is that even a thing? Her son doesn't even like to talk to the teacher who he loves on video. This is very challenging for young students or young children to engage that way. And one thing I also wanted to highlight is, she says, we live in a small space, but thankfully have the woods out back. And I think those two things, the music and the woods out back,
Mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
just feel like, okay, you can do the play therapy.
mm-hmm.
You've got some things, and we
Absolutely.
talked a lot about the play. There's also a play
Mm-hmm,
course that one of our faculty is going to be doing,
mm-hmm.
specifically related to this time of the pandemic, and some ideas that will generate from that. So I think probably one of our faculty will type in some information about that as well. But I would suggest, can the play therapist have sessions with you? Can you meet online?
Mm-hmm.
You get some of those ideas. These are things you can do at home to facilitate what needs to be facilitated. But even just being out in the woods is going to do wonders, to be able to help with getting some of this emotion out. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
Oh, I absolutely underscore it. It's a play. It's a true play that is therapeutic. Even in therapy, it is. So it's not the therapist. It's the true play that it has the therapeutic component. Is the secret ingredient. Is this what it brings? Active rest. It allows the brain to rewire. It brings all the conditions that are necessary to deal with impulsiveness. So I would say uh, don't think of it as too technically, but if you can at all persuade your play therapist to coach you on being able to provide some conditions, or provide the structure, or set the stage for the child, or give you some ideas. You don't need to worry about being able to observe everything or know what's going on. You don't have to worry about any of that. Again, it's the therapy is in the play, not in the person, so it can do its own work in the middle of a forest. Nobody has to be there, so you don't have to worry about it. It's so if you can do this, but the music, and as I say, the outdoors activity, those kinds of things that are very natural, that come from him, that engage him, will be the best way um, uh, to be able to assist him. And so as far as being able to find his sense of self, to able to realize his own potential, to have the feelings that he needs, that will provide him with what is conducive. So the main thing is your relationship with him. Don't let his problems get in the way of your relationship. Don't let your attempt to make headway get in the way. Because his relationship to you is first and foremost, and so keep that intact as much as possible. And if you have to jettison, let go of trying to make headway and teach lessons, that's okay, because the relationship is far more important than that. And the next thing it actually is when he's engaged the most in play, is you will notice the benefits that will come from it.
Yeah. Which this particular mom sounds like she has quite a lot of insight into her child. She sees the musicality, she sees the benefit of the forest. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom in this mother about who her
Mm,
child is and the natural bent for play. I'd love to have a conversation with this mom and say, so what do you see? What's his natural
mm,
bent? Is he a builder? Is he a storyteller? What
mm,
makes him come alive as you look at
mm.
him? There's no play therapist who's going to have that information. So I would say, don't forget about the resident
That's right.
play therapist inside of you. Don't shortchange yourself here. You've got a lot of insight into your child. And I actually think because of your relationship, that you could be a really quite productive here in moving him to the emotional playgrounds that he needs, because you actually see his natural bent and you can put your finger into it in a very safe way because he trusts you. And you might actually find that this is a blessing in disguise as you become the answer here to
I was
releasing what
thinking
it
of
is that he
that. There
needs.
may be
Yeah,
some silver lining.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I think so. Yeah, that's the sense I get.
Uh,
Oh, you got this. You got this. Yeah.
and there's something wonderful about being able to give to your child the conditions that that they
Mm,
need.
yeah,
And again, it's nature we're delivering our child to when they're in the play mode,
yeah.
and to be
And
able to.
and I think too, it's just wonderful to have the benefit of all these wonderful programs and people to help us and to guide us here when we need help with our kids. However, on the other hand, I think sometimes we assign too much credit to, as you were saying, Gordon, to the program. That the healing really is delivering our children to the play and letting getting the impediments out of the way for expression and for movement of what needs to happen. And so we can't forget that it isn't programs that take care of our kids, but it's the
Yes.
importance of the movement here and the adults that are helping prime what needs to come out and clearing the and
Yeah.
setting the stage for it to come out. So all is not lost. This program wasn't going to save your child.
Hmm.
You can facilitate what was needed here and still make headway.
Yeah. Well, and I know we don't have too much time left here. I want to just maybe just take a minute, a couple minutes, that's the last few, to talk just a little bit about the reentry question of the question of coming back into daycares, coming back to schools. Some places are starting to do this gradually. The way that one early childhood educator who wrote in, who sent in a question, I actually think she just captured this quite beautifully. She said, for some, the transition will be okay, for some children, for some young children. For others, what was an easy transition before may not be the case now. because everything has changed in terms of their
Mhm.
connection with home. For the others, the whole thing is just going to be hard.
Mhm.
And I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the challenge. Is it is going to be. We don't know what it's going to be like for the children, and it's understanding, I think, even more how to keep the connections. This
Mhm.
feels really
That's
important
exactly it.
in the reentry, but also in
Mhm.
even right now, it's the keeping connections with the teacher, it's keeping connections with the parents, it's now going both ways and trying to figure out creative ways of doing that bridging of holding on. That's what transition is about. It's not about the separation, but about the holding on.
Helping them hold on to you when apart, knowing how it is that they hold on to you through sameness, through having them carry something precious of yours when they're there, whatever their age is, but helping them hold on to you when apart, and always putting the focus on the return, the next connection, even if it is something in their lunchbox or in their backpack that they are opening up at a certain time. If they're having difficulty with the alarm, what Tamara was saying was absolutely right. They've had a chance to reconnect with you. It's facing separation, even if they enjoy school, even if they enjoy preschool or daycare. It is facing the separation from you that's going to be hard when they have this togetherness. But now you've also had a chance to establish a sense of togetherness that's deeper, and so it's just helping them hold on when apart in all the ways that lovers used to do before we ever had internet. They were so inventive. You find thousands of ways of being able to do it, wearing the same thing, having a magic thread, doing
Business
this, carrying
dream.
something of the other person. There's just so many ways. Just
Mm.
allow yourself to be creative to do this, and always putting the focus on the next connection. That relaxes a child so that they can do what is necessary, and they can hold on to you when apart.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, and I just reading in a question that just came in live here about a mom who's in the hospital with her child who's born, her baby, premature baby, um, with siblings at home that can't see her 3-year-old, 6-year-old. It's heartbreaking. They haven't even been able to see the baby, and struggling and missing you. I think all the things that Gordon was just saying about the holding on, the connection. The Invisible String is a wonderful book by Patrice Karst. Maybe someone can type that into the chat there. And just finding those creative ways to hold on with the smells, with the connections, reading a story online,
Mm.
your favorite story, even if you can't time it right, if you can record your voice and then send them the story. I actually, there's a lot of ideas. I'm just thinking, I did something on Bridging the Night where I talked a lot about different ways of holding on that way. There's a few resources out there, but um,
Yeah.
it's it's hard, but you got to keep figure out the ways to keep that connection, and no matter what the circumstances. This feels like it's such a theme right now, is of how do we hold on when apart.
Yeah.
um, and we have to get creative with it, have to get creative, use all the senses, music, voice. These are wonderful ways as well, finding what works for your child, your student, whether it's you're a early childhood educator, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher. What works for that child? What's going to help them? Is it holding on to a little heart that you've drawn? And I saw a beautiful video of a school where it was actually my sister's son's school, and they showed a video of everyone had a heart, and they would pass it from one to the next, and each one had drawn their own, but it looked like they were passing this heart from one to the next. And it's that idea of being able to hold on that way.
Mm.
um,
Can I just add one last thing to that?
yeah.
I would also want to say to this mom, sometimes we're up against things that are truly futile, and you're in a hospital with a new baby, and your kids are at home, and this is tough. This is a time for tears and having to deal with the futility. I think the fears that go through our heads as parents when we're in these circumstances is that our kids are going to be damaged and broken for life, that this is an abandonment, a rejection, a trauma that we can't come back from. Everything that I know about development and attachment, I know that to be incorrect. I
Mm.
know that we may
Yeah.
have a separation, we may have a void that we have to deal with. I remember my own daughter detaching from me when I was in the hospital with her sister, and just this sense of mommy had disappeared. What I know about relationship, though, is that when you get back home and you're their mom there, and you may have some bumps there, but they want you. There, you're going to find your way back to their side.
Yeah.
You're going to be their mom again. This doesn't scar them for life. Attachment is very robust. Kids are incredibly resilient. You're not going to stop caring for them. You're not going to stop showing up. This is a bump in the road right now, but please do not think all is lost. Attachment is far, far, until they lower you in the grave, you're working on attachment with your kids. So
And
please,
beyond.
and beyond. That's
Yes,
right. I
because the
forgot.
relationship still works.
They carry
It,
you with them, so
it's
it's
right. No,
robust.
their relationship with you will work
That's
for
right.
their life, not just yours, their life.
Yeah.
But
So
those
there's
are
lots of
wonderful
time.
words to, I think, to end with and put it into perspective
Mhm.
as the absolute that relationship is strong, and
Yeah.
and the feelings will come back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.